Hello, everyone. Thank you all for tuning into this conversation. My name is Alex Schlechter, and I'm the Education and Public Programs Coordinator here at Aperture. Tonight, we are excited to have Vân-Nhi Nguyễn, winner of the 2023 Aperture Portfolio Prize, and Varun Nayar, Associate Managing Editor of Aperture Magazine, here to talk about Nhi's work and her current exhibition at Baxter Street at the Camera Club of New York. For those of you who might not be familiar with Aperture, we are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1952 by a group of artists, writers, and curators as a common ground for photography. Aperture today is a multi-platform publisher that unites the photography community in print, in person, and online. This past year, Nhi was announced the winner of Aperture's Portfolio Prize, an annual international competition to discover, exhibit, and publish new talents in photography. The purpose of the prize is to identify trends in contemporary photography and highlight artists whose work deserves greater recognition. As the winner of the Portfolio Prize, Nhi joins an esteemed roster of artists, and we are thrilled to support her practice. Nhi's exhibition will be on view in New York at Baxter Street until September 1st. I'm pleased to tell you just a bit more about our speakers tonight. Nhi lives and works in Vietnam, and her work surrounds the idea of memories, looking, seeing, questioning, and believing. Varun Nayar is Associate Managing Editor of Aperture Magazine. Prior to joining Aperture in 2022, he was an editor at the Museum of Art and Photography in Bengaluru, India. His work has appeared in Foam, Words Without Borders, Pacific Standard, and Himal South Asian. This year's Portfolio Prize was generously sponsored by MPB. Aperture's programs are made possible by the generosity of our Board of Trustees, our members, and other individuals, and in part by the New York State Legislature. I'd also like to thank our subscribers to Aperture Magazine, all of whom support Aperture and our programs, including the Portfolio Prize. Thank you again for joining us, and I will now pass it over to Nhi and Varun.
Thank you, Alex, and hi, Nhi. Thanks for agreeing to do this on what's a very early morning for you.
Okay.
I know Alex mentioned your series, but I was wondering before we get there, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your relationship to photography, how you found it, and more specifically, portraiture.
I guess my relationship with photography has always been a very, to me, it's quite interesting. I started photography when I was in high school, and, just as a way of like trying to figure out what's worked for me and what doesn't. And so my entry point was, like most people, was also fashion photography. But then, like as time progressed, I kind of find this medium for myself, which is really just more focus on portraiture and more like environmental portraits, so that it conveys best what my intention is, rather than just the clothes that someone wear or that more commercialized stuff. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, and you talked about doing work that is sort of more than just the clothes that people wear, or that sort of communicates some affect, I suppose. And your series, as you grow older, certainly has that. I think one of the strongest parts of it is the relationship you are able to establish with your subjects, and then transferring that to the relationship that the audience is also able to establish with them through your portraits. Could you tell us about how you got started on that ongoing project and the focus of it?
So I guess I started when I was living abroad in Toronto, and it really was just a way for me to rediscover myself and my experience living abroad. And for so long I've just kind of started to forget about my home, and I just started seeing this temporariness, like just very fleeting, everything just very fleeting, and of this experience of living abroad in a country that was quite very much unfamiliar to me, and it's very much a shock. Came as to me as a shock that the West is just entirely very much different from where I'm raised in, and the cultural is just hit me just very hard, and it's just very hard for me to connect with other kind of people with different cultural upbringing, and this kind of like oblivion towards mine, which caused me this very, very intense confusion about myself. So, like I started doing that, and when I finally got back to Vietnam, I kind of just keep doing what I've been doing in Toronto. But this time it almost gained like this sense of rediscovery of myself and of my home, and like what kind of memories I've had and what it's been affected during the time that I was away. And yeah, just generally like figuring out this disconnection I have with my own surrounding and trying to piece together that for now. But yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned rediscovery, and I think one of the interesting parts of this project is that it jumps through time or jumps between time periods and bridges the past and present in some interesting ways, particularly in the references that you use. These are both from Vietnam's recent and distant history, as well as your own personal experiences, your childhood. And all of those sort of, through all of those references, you're able to sort of design these arrangements for these portraits. If I may, I'd want to pick up an image, a specific image from this series. Alex, maybe you could help bring that up. It's titled Three Aunties. It's just as an example. My understanding is that this pose that you've set up references an image of, or images of, anti-colonial female rebellion soldiers that were captured and then subsequently executed by American settlers. Could you tell us a little bit more both about this image and how you use references in your work?
I think one aspect of the work that I'm really interested in is also the war, even though like it's not really like in your face, like that aspect is not really in your face in the work, but still it's there because, like I think the war is something that's talked about so often, yet it is truly never enough. Like like general understanding of the war, even for myself, is something, like for someone, for myself, who was born, not that long when it ended, but it is enough to feel this sort of disconnection with the history. And it's important for myself that I'm able to understand this effect and how the landscape and the people that I'm surrounded in is trying to move on and trying to communicate with it and through it, I guess. So I guess this expressions of kind of like belonging, and how I can translate that into a language that is unique for myself, yet, like also universally understandable. And also like most of the use for iconographies, universal symbols, or even more like esoteric distinctive visual cues like this one, it kind of act like this vehicle that connect between my own experience as someone who's migrant and now just rediscovering our home. It's truly just like a dialogue between me and, like the history that I'm supposed to be very in touch with, which I felt like this kind of, yeah. So all these poses, all these staging, I guess it's also like talk about like how staging and more like a more theatrical elements in the work. It's also like a contribution to this kind of construction of the memories that I had and the construction of the memories that I don't have, that I'm supposed to have. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess those that are more inherited than specifically remembered.
right.
Were archives always so you spoke about sort of you developing your own visual language, and certainly that is so clear in this project, but were archives and was archival imagery always a part of that exploration, or was that something that you first moved away from fashion and then you sort of slowly developed a relationship to the imagery that you were seeing and how that could be incorporated into your work?
I think the latter applies more to the way that I work. Because whenever I started this series, it was really when like I started looking back at some of the family photo albums that I have. And, like when I started looking at it, it felt like this very, like obviously it's very beautiful and it's just gorgeous to look at this time path that your family lived through and your relatives and how they look like and, how they live during those times. But like this sort of nostalgia feels kind of like a bait, and it's all very binary, and it's just like one definition of what the family is. And it's quite, to me, it felt flat, and it's very one-dimensional because like you're only looking at the pictures of these people and you're not really like understanding like the kind of not really comprehending like the kind of time that they're living in or what kind of person they are. And so for me, it kind of hooked me on to that to this practice of trying to create this sort of again family photo album for my time that has this kind of like, as I said, as mentioned, these iconography, these cues that is universally understandable. And also for that, when people look at it, they have this kind of like interpretation for themselves that they can pick up through these kind of subtle hints in the pictures and how connect the time with whatever is happening in the picture. I feel like that works best for myself.
Yeah. Speaking of sort of you mentioned earlier about the people. I'm also interested in the relationships, like I mentioned in an earlier question, the relationships that you establish with your subjects. You've said in the past that places are important, and the same is for people. You have to be in love with both in order to create an image that satisfies yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about how you are drawn to or select the people and the places that appear in your portraits?
So generally I look for domestic places as they're harder for one to get to see and, like actually submerge in it, like, and, and I see the house as its own kind of family photo album. It is a place where a lot of memories are held and a lot of like the act of just making a memory, and then how the objects and the walls and even like the chairs in the home kind of hold these kind of memories in them. And so, it acts as this kind of its own family photo album or archive, or whatever you want to call it. So, for me, it's to find a place that resonates with this idea and, how it reminds me of my own experience and memories. You can look at the image of the woman sitting on an uncovered bed against a pink wall. You can pull that picture. Right. So this image. I made this, like as I was looking for a place that reminds me of both my childhood where I would take road trips with my parents a lot, and we would stay overnight at some like roadside motel, and this specific one kind of reminds me of that, with how kitschy the aesthetic of the room is and how like the wall is kind of dingy looking a little bit, but also at the same time it keeps up really well. I kind of enjoy this picture because, you know, like in this case, it's like the place reminds me of a memory that I cherish, and the person is a very close friend of mine. So for me, she just kind of like, for me to find someone who is understanding of the work that I do, and who also like have their own autonomy in the place, and kind of like when they enter the space, they kind of figure out what to do, and they kind of like almost like directing myself, directing me on how to take the picture in a sense. And so for me to have this kind of collaboration with the people in the picture, which most of them are my close friend, it's very important, so that there's this kind of relationship established that of like a mutual understanding, and then we both in a space that we feel safe in, and we trust our each other to move on with the image. Because I guess like for some of the work, for some pictures, it felt like, for some pictures there's this same attitude of people being looks very sad, even though there's this kind of like confidence they have. And especially for this one too, which I feel like it is working well as because they understand like the feeling that I have with this current time, and they help me channel it, and help me channel this kind of like, you know, disconnection I feel living in a country that's, you know, is rapidly changing in its landscape, and also how people think while, you know, still feeling this burden of the past, and being grounded by tradition and culture at the same time. So yeah.
Interesting. I didn't realize that, but it is sort of within the poses there is sort of that sort of disaffected quality that you are talking about, that is perhaps referencing a larger history.
Right.
You mentioned so many sort of, even in that photo itself, there are so many, it's rich with so many different references to both your childhood and in general, the subject is a friend of yours. I'm curious about, in general, you've spoken about, even in the Aperture piece that we published, about the kinds of images that you do and don't like, or the kinds of images that you're drawn to. And perhaps it's a sort of going back to the earlier question about moving away from the fashion imagery. You talked about how you're not you try to move away from that type of image that felt too sterile, clean, or dishonest, you know? And kind of the answer you've just given, you sort of pack in references and visual cues and clues and hints into your portraits. Could you tell me a little bit about your influences and sort of how you arrived at that approach and moved away from some of the more perhaps sterile work you were seeing?
Yeah, I guess a lot of the work that I look, I think I only have like two people that I really look for references or for inspiration about like their world building, or about like construction of the memory, which I'm really interested in, is Pau, who are her, and Deanna Lawson, which I feel like they are kind of like the masters of what they do, and, you know, like creating this idealistic yet also very grounded and realist image, like this construction of both the very real world and the imagined world, which I'm really interested in. And for me, like, to be able to create an image that speaks to the kind of disorientation that I'm feeling living in a world that's just not really in a world, more like living in an environment where it's just changing very rapidly and changing, quite frankly, too fast for people to really like comprehending what's really going on. Kind of like creating this sort of it's kind of funny in a sense, and I really want to channel that very disorienting feeling in the work. And so yeah, so the kind of like, I guess like the picture of what that I said where it's like feels sterile and dishonest was all because when I started working in fashion, and the work it just very much so commercialized to a point that it's too idealistic for me to really comprehend what's really like going on. And I guess I really has had to like take a break from that and trying to figure out like what kind of figure out like my language, and you know, people who are trying to also communicate the same feeling that I'm trying to. And so yeah, there's just something more grounded and more real, and you know, like you trying like just trying to um depict the best that I can of what I really am seeing in front of me, and not just something more idealized and something that caters to like, I guess, more Eurocentric view or more upper class feel view. So yeah.
Yeah. One thing that we mentioned early on, and I think we can sort of conclude on this note, is that this is an ongoing project. This is something that you're still working on and thinking through. Would you want to tell us a little bit about where this project is heading or what you're working on currently?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to, you know, like, I think that as this project moves, it kind of like unfolds a lot of things that I want to see, and it unfolds. And, you know, like, I'm trying to see more, and how like this general idea that I had is evolving into something larger and something, um, you know, that I'm not prepared to see, which I feel like it's quite very much exciting for me to see what I can come up with, and um what the challenge I can face in the coming time. And also like, I guess what I'm doing right now is also I feel like it's very, just to put it in the simplest sense, it's just like trying to move outdoor, and you know, like connecting with this environment. And because like I think that it's very interesting, at least in Vietnam, that um the indoor, like the ones that I depicted in my pictures, is quite very much wildly different than what's going on outdoors. And um it is very disorienting, like even more disorienting. And it is something that's quite a challenge for me to really trying to connect with and I think that, you know, as time progresses, I kind of want to um trying to see how I can tackle this kind of challenge. And just yeah, it's just more of like talking about like how the climate and how the environment in dialogue with the people, and how they're like more like the adaptation people take um when they enter these open air. Yeah.
So it would still sort of be focused around portraiture, or you feel like you want to incorporate a number of different approaches, or you're still sort of figuring that out?
It is also, it is landscape and portraiture mostly, but I'm also trying to figure out collage aspect. And I guess like one of the I'm preparing for an upcoming show where I get to be able to do a large like kind of like wall size collage, which I'm very excited about, and it's also like in the same realm of this idea of memories and belongings, and also very much the same as my project As You Grow Older. It just, yeah, which is going to show in Hong Kong International Photo Festival, if anyone might be in Hong Kong at that time.
Yeah, excellent. And this is a collage of the images within As You Grow Older, but composed in a different way, or a collage made for this?
Collage made for that exhibition, actually. It is brand new set of images, and it's also found images of family photo album that's not just of myself, but also of other people. So it's kind of like speaking about this sort of like reconstruction of the memories, where you kind of make the family photo album what you think of it, and how you can actually build up something of your own. Because like, at least for like a lot of from what I've seen and from what I've learned, the kind of family photo album that people think of is still kind of sort of binary and traditional. And so for me to be able to do something like a collage that use found images and also found objects, and kind of just like incorporating it together in a sort of larger scale, is something very exciting. And yeah, I guess like words, like speaking wise, I'm just not really doing it any justice, but yeah, kind of excited to show what I've been working on.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to see it, like with the Baxter Street show for anyone in New York as well. Thank you so much, Annie, for walking us through the series and for sharing your experience making it. Alex, I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you both so much for being here virtually. I wish we could all have been together in person, but this is still really nice. And thanks to everyone for watching. If you're in New York, please check out Ni's show at Baxter Street, located at 126 Baxter Street in Manhattan. If not, there is a beautiful piece written by Thessaly La Force on aperture.org and in the summer issue of Aperture magazine. So Ni and Varun, thank you again. I hope you have a lovely evening and a lovely start to your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.